Can you talk a little bit about that process of like when you create a finalized mark and how to kind of remove yourself from it to be able to abstract it out and let it sit in all these different ways on top of all these different pieces? I think as designers that sometimes we can struggle with sometimes.
Yeah. It's kind of, you know, I think it's just experience, you know, the longer you're in the world, it's like you design one mark and then you just kind of start to play with it. You know, when you're designing in the creative process, you don't just say, oh, I'm going to design one logo, this is the answer, that's it. You go through a process, you sketch, or maybe you go straight to the computer and, you know, you come up with about 20 plus different variations, and then sometimes those start to overlap, and it's, you kind of just, I don't know, I think part of my desire to design that way has come from not, like I said, just not wanting to have a stagnant brand, you know, and just kind of playing with it and giving yourself tools and pieces to work with.
And then I come home and look at what you've done, and then I like push on different stuff, and then like, but she does the same to me with, like, if we're decorating or whatever, you know, so we have a good...
It's a nice balance, like I don't, you know, he pushes me in ways that from my more traditional background have kind of struggled with at the beginning, because I was like, no, these are the rules, it has to be this way.
Yeah, I'm like the, you know, you don't have to take lessons to play guitar, you know, just pick it up, plug it in. Like,
so, you know, and it's changed a little, you know, my style of designing has changed a little bit, and it's, well, I mean, as a designer, you always are evolving and changing, so it's just kind of fun to be a part of, I guess. All of the design details, we also are responsible for. So John and I, or typically John has like the holistic vision of what the space will look like, and we kind of shred it back and forth, and then we go online and we start pulling links to chairs, to light fixtures, to vintage maps, to you name it, and then we basically send it all to Bo, say buy what you want, he buys everything. I mean, in this process we had upstairs was just filled with all sorts of tick-tacky little details, and we come in, arrange it, organize it, and then just start placing. I mean, the maps, the succulents in the fish nets, you know, everything is thought about. I mean, it's part of what we do too, is technically kind of merchandising and styling a little bit, so, which we both come from that background as well a little bit, but so.
Well, again, like, I'm not a very trained person, but like I've taught myself over the years to work in like Google SketchUp, you know, like I do a lot of rendering like that. We kind of generally start with like a floor plan and start like laying things out, and then I just, you know, get a feel for what the client is looking for ultimately, you know, whether they really want me to sort of direct the aesthetic, or they already have some ideas, you know, so just like, I definitely do not look at other spaces very much. Like, I sort of take inspiration from, I don't know, like, it's kind of hard to
non-design related things.
Non-design related things, like, I guess is a good way to put it.
I mean,
well, yeah, that, or like, the way that like 18 layers of paint look stripped off the side of a building, or just kind of like, I don't know, I just sort of, something sort of finds its way in, you know, like it has everything to do with the client generally, you know, like we're starting a project now for Heirloom Bakery that's going to be in Brookside, and it's going to be a lot more feminine, you know, than probably what people are used to, you know, like this is pretty rugged and like rustic, you know. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
I kind of understand, well, from, again, the design
I'll let
world,
Nicole like refine me.
From the design standpoint, you know, there is that, you know, like our phase starts with a questionnaire. We have a series of probably 25 to 30 questions that we hand out to our client that really helps. I don't think we need it to. Yeah, sorry. A questionnaire that basically kind of runs through, you know, describe your brand in a paragraph. Where do you see your brand in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? What kind of collateral pieces and point of purchase pieces do you want to sell? What kind of employees are you going to have? You know, like all sorts of little nitpicky detail things, and that really kicks off the process for us.
Yeah, like how refined is your concept? Like, do you want us to sort of explore that more? You know.
Yeah. From there, creatively on John's side, I mean, like I said, he's the artist. You know, he's the rogue. Just teasing. But he's just kind of more free-forming. He doesn't go online and start searching for other space inspiration. I think a lot of it is just, I mean, I hate to say intuition, but a lot of it just kind of comes from other resources. My standpoint, you know, I do a little bit more of an online research process of pulling inspiration of, you know, kind of looking at what's out there in terms of competition, and then kind of saying, well, obviously, you know, just what I can do to set their brand apart from competition.
Like, how would you look at Portfolio, since that's more of an established like place now? Like, how has it changed since you've left it? And, like,
Well, yeah, it's like, so you got to raise this child and put it out into the world, and then just sort of go like.
Yeah, I think what she's saying is like the functionality. You know, you go into Portfolio, all of a sudden they start putting eggshells.
A lot of
stuff
it's
on
been pulled back.
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot of details in that space that are no longer there. Like, we had more plants scattered throughout. We had these really elaborate, cool steel centerpieces that had the succulents, and then, you know, the
People
sauces.
break them, steal them, you know, it's like.
You start having to worry about general public,
Yeah.
you know. It's
People decapitated my plants the other night, and I was
Like
so
first
mad.
night.
Come on.
So there's like lots of like, we really get sort of obsessive with like small elements, you know, but we've had to kind of learn over the years like what's functional in a public space, you know, like what's not functional, like, you know, utilitarian for me. I mean, that's like, I came out of painting and I stopped painting because I couldn't justify, like, for me personally, just doing something that hung on a wall, you know, like I wanted it to be functional. So, you know, there's a lot of things that we did at Port Fonda that did have to go away because, you know, it's a learning process, you know, it's like, I couldn't believe that people broke the glass doors on the vintage glass doors, you know, it's like, but Bo here was wanting to put all these like nice little, and I was like, you can't, man, you know, they're gonna get taken or whatever, you know, so it's like, it's kind of a learning process with that sort of thing, but, you know, like, hanging some old fishing lures, you know, it's like, gotta remember to like clip off the hooks, because, you know, can't have that hanging in a public space, but anyway, is that?
Get really excited about these ideas, and we formulate them, and we have this huge vision.
To do what we want to do. I mean, I think that's just.
Right, but how do you scale that back and kind of like unmarry yourself from this phenomenal like idea that you have, and you know could work so well, and like be able to pull these pieces back and still shape those to have that same result?
Like the integrity of your designs and your process.
I love to take like a 25-cent like thrift store find and put it in the right context and make it look really expensive. You know, like, I think our design aesthetic is not about like the most expensive materials. Like, you know, it's like we sort of pick and choose like where we're going to spend our money, you know. Like, we spent a lot of money on the material for the bar, you know.
At the coffee table.
Right, but the coffee table was like scrap wood, and we just sort of banged it out with what we had laying in the...
I was getting ready to throw it away, and he's like, no, save that. And I'm like, this is trash, man. This is...
But it's a very fine line, because I don't like to put out there like, oh, we're cheap, you know, because that is not the case, you know. But it's, we sort of, you know, find our way through it, you know, depending on the budget. Like, yeah, we have to rein it in sometimes, but like we're not like out like specking like Herman Miller chairs and stuff like that, you know. Like, that's not our thing, you know. So
I would have to say though that like it's what they're standing behind is the quality aspect of what you're doing. I mean, this is going to get beat up. Your bar is going to take a beating, and
right.
You know, make sure your metal is you know, they talked me out of doing just the pipe, you know, flange foot bar, and it was like, hey, you really need to like, this is going to take a beating. You should really get after this a little bit harder. And it was like, I know you're right. I shouldn't spend all this money, but like I know you're right. So I need to, you know, type of deal. So it's
but then we save money on other things.
yeah.
Well, the material, yeah, like so I knew. I mean, really, this space has a lot of existing character. Like when we first came in, I mean, the shell's pretty. We didn't do a lot to it, you know. Like the ceiling is the way it was. The floors are the way it was. You know, the brick, the trim. You know, so there was a lot of like pine in here. So for me, it was like, okay, well, I kind of want to run with that, and like we always talked about like honoring the space. So it's like, okay, well, I think it would be cool to show like a lot of different stages of pine, like evolution. Like the bar is like, you know, pretty smooth, pretty clean, you know, but then the paneling, it's like kind of the same material, but it's rough. It's, you know, that was kind of a starting point for this space, you know, and then with like decor and things like that, we kind of just like have a general idea, but like a lot of stuff in here, Bo was like, I think I can go get a bunch of stuff from my grandparents' house. And I was like, do it, you know? So like fishing rods showed up, and then I was like, well, I'm gonna build a rack for them and put them on the wall, you know? It's kind of, there's a lot of sort of spur of the moment things that happen, but.
I think I just, you know, I'm sitting there, I'm like, let's buy new. And he's like, why don't, it's almost creates a more dynamic story when all of a sudden I'm like, oh, by the way, those are my grandpa's Boy Scout badges from '51 hanging on the wall. And then they're like, oh my gosh, those match your bags. So we need to put some bags over here. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, this is like, this, I'm getting goosebumps. Like, whoa, that's magical, you know? And so it's like, wow, you guys just do your thing, you know, because this is really fun. And that, to me, that's been the best part, is like finding things that they were laying in boxes in garages, and all of a sudden it's like, it's made beautiful. It gets given another life. It's given another chance, and there's a sort of like restoration with that just kind of, it brings a life to the space that I think is fun. And I love it when people come in here and are like, oh my gosh, just let me take it in for a minute. And I'm like, thank you.
Sort of like drawing that out of somebody, like out of him, how do you communicate that to other people? How do you market yourself?
Yeah.
I mean, you're called like Utilitarian Workshop. Like, how are you communicating to the public what you did for him?
It's an experience, and I think that, you know, people come in and they're like, who did this? And they say utilitarian. You know, I mean, and that's just how it happens. You know, we're not super busy, but we take on one project at a time. We never take on multiple projects.
That's your marketing.
Yeah.
Basically, people go experience it. They like it.
I
There's
mean,
a story going on.
We've sort of struggled with like becoming a proper company,
Yeah.
like putting ourselves out there right, like, you know.
We're bad at marketing, ultimately.
which I
Our
actually,
clients are our marketing.
Yeah, I was
pretty
gonna
much,
say,
you know,
I
like-
disagree.
That's your front face.
Yeah.
In many ways.
It's like I'll talk about
The story
them.
that goes behind it, or goes with it.
Yeah, and it's like, because not everyone, like not every space that we've worked on is like family heirlooms for the decor, you know? Like it's just different. It's just like, Bo's just like that kind of dude, and I knew that because I got to know him, and it's like, I knew he was a person of like integrity, history, sort of honor, and it was just like, it just made sense, you know? Like, it's different with different clients, you know? It's just, and like, we didn't get that space thinking we're gonna open a retail shop, you know? It was like, gonna be our offices, and for me to like have a little showroom to have a piece of furniture in, you know, so like somebody can come, touch, feel, you know, get a sense, you know, it sort of legitimize ourselves, like having an office space. Makes it easier for people to write checks, trust you a little more. But as we sort of got into that, like, you know, we started meeting people. Like, we had friends who made jewelry, and then it was like, well, this is going to be boring in here if it's just like tables, you know. So we started like this idea of this like pop-up concept, you know, and that's what it started out as. Like, let's do this weekend only like pop-up shop, and you know, keep it predominantly locally driven, you know, and sort of give two things, like give local makers, designers like a platform, you know, to develop or explore like what they do in directly in front of the public, you know, I guess, and then for people to be able to come into that space freely and sort of like get like familiarized with our aesthetic, you know, or like who we are. I think it's kind of been a confusing thing for people because like they don't know like if we're a retail store or, you know, design firm or whatever, and it's like, well, it was both, you know, like we never wanted to do like a retail store. Like that sort of disgusts me, you know. It's like we wanted to do the anti thing, you know. It's consignment, so it gives the designers incentive to drive traffic to us, and like you know, throughout that we met a lot of new people that I think has spawned some like new projects and like new friendships and things. I mean, for us, it really came down to like we were just so busy, like we didn't have time to oversee it in the way that we wanted to. We never wanted it to be a full-time thing, you know. Like it was a year like pop-up thing, you know. And as far as like to speak to like leaving people, you know, or like everyone that we work with has like, you know, several other avenues which they, you know, I mean, it's such an online world, you know. Like part of that store was like, hey, let's like have something that people can come in and check out, you know. But we wanted to keep it away from that like retail world, like, you know, Black Friday sale, you know, like that's just not what it was about, you know. It was about like meeting people, getting our name and aesthetic sort of out there, you know. And for that to continue, we would have had to like, you know, legally like make someone a partner to run it and give them incentive to run it and deal with the designers in a way that was like as personal as we were. And like we just didn't really feel comfortable doing that because, I don't know, like it's hard to have something like that going that's associated with your brand and like not being involved in it. And so that's kind of how it started to be, you know. And it's the same way, like I don't want to work with a client and not be really personally involved with it, like really hands-on. So for us it was just a decision, like, you know, instead of working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, like how can we kind of dial ourselves back to focus on what, you know, like this has always been kind of really what we really do, you know. So.
Also, just as a heads up, our August event is going to be at Berkeley. It's I think the 27th, last Friday of August, and we're going to be talking about design for good. And then in September, we're going to be over at La Cucaracha Press doing a letterpress and screen printing event. So we're going to kind of learn how to do that and get some hands-on to do our own. And so just as to plant a seed, we're going to put out a contest of kind of creating some copy and design marks. And a few of those kind of top ones will actually make into screens to actually be able to make t-shirts and posters and everything. So kind of think about if you want to be a part of that. But those are a couple next events coming up. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook to be in the know of all those things. And so hopefully we'll see you next month. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.